Hello, my name is Avivah Zelsis Fitrama. My number metric 702535. I would like to present my ethics in public administration individual assignment about public participation in decision-making process. The article that I choose is Public Participation Assessment for Environmental Impact Assessment in Malaysia. Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA. It refers to a process that is used to predict and evaluate the likely environmental consequence of a proposed project or development. The purpose of this is to identify and assess potential environmental impacts at an early stage of planning and decision making for a project, and also aims to mitigate negative impacts and maximize positive impacts on the environment from the outset of a project. The main stages typically including screening, scoping, impact prediction and evaluation, development of mitigation measures, preparation of an environmental impact statements or EIS or report. EIA provides information to the public, interest groups, and decision makers regarding environmental impacts, and it allows incorporate of public participation, feedback, and decision making into project planning and approval. The issue of this article is about public participation for EIA in Malaysia is currently and not adequately implemented. Opportunities for the public involvement in the Malaysia EIA process are limited and occur too late in the process for second schedule activities. And the legislation and guidelines governing EIA in Malaysia, like proper, emphasize and clear procedure regarding public participation. Despite decades of EIA, environmental issues persist in Malaysia, indicating weaknesses in how the system functions, and there is a need to examine international best practice and lessons that could help strengthen the public participation in for EIA in Malaysia. The implementation of public participation in the EIA process in Malaysia are public participation is only explicitly required for activities listed under the second schedule of the EIA Order 2015. In practice, opportunities for participation occur late, mainly focused on reviewing and commenting on the display EIA report, and the guidelines provided by the Department of Environmental lack clear procedure for involving the public meaningfully. Study sites show the participation requirements outlined in legislation and guidelines are often not properly followed during implementation. Engagement activities are frequently carried out in a superficial manner without real consideration of public input. Coordination between stakeholders like proponents, consultants, authorities is weak, hindering joint implementation. And also negative attitudes among some stakeholders undermine participation quality in certain cases. Overall, the implementation of participation has not been integrated or effective to date in Malaysia. This issue persists, indicating shortcoming within the functioning of the entire EAI system, including public involvement component. The idea to improve government decision making in EIA, the first one is strength legal requirement for participation, not just reviewing EIA reports. Next one is develop clear guidelines outlining participatory procedure and roles for all stakeholders. Establish early notification and scoping to facilitate input on project design and tour. Use a variety of engagement methods like meetings, hearings, online tools to reach diverse audience. The next one is summarize and respond systematically to all public comments received. Train decision makers to understand the value of local indigenous knowledge. build capacity for participatory techniques among EIA participation, establish monitoring and evaluation of participation quality and its influence, and provide feedback to communities on final decision and how inputs was considered, and coordinate participation centrally to maintain standards and public trust, and also develop cooperative approaches between agency, proponents, and communities, and also encourage participatory funding and empower stakeholder oversight role. And the last one is about continually improve based on participation reviews and changing community needs. The overall aim would be to incorporate public views into planning and decision making earlier and more meaningful at each key of EIA stage, demonstrating benefits of robust participation to sustain public support for the process. Okay, the comparison between the country of Malaysia, Canada, and New Zealand. In Malaysia, legislation lacks emphasis on public participation. Environmental Quality Act in 1974 or EQA 1974. Participation required only for second schedule activities, limited to comments on display of EIA reports. Implementation of participation has been ineffective. Issues persisting indicate weaknesses in system, and also guidelines lack clear participation procedure. In Canada, in Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012 legislates participation requirement at each stage, an opportunity for involvement in project description, environmental assessment, commencement, environmental impact statement analysis, and EA reporting stage. It quite clear. Meaningful participation embedded in both type of assessment, and also agency responsible for robust implementation according to international standard. For the New Zealand, in Resource Management Act 1991 provides legal basis for participation in assessment, environmental effect, and resource consent processes. It noticed provision for inviting inputs and application, and time frame set for inviting considering public comments, and also MFE ensures sustainable management and participation as per guideline. Participation integrated a screening, scoping, application stage of its processes. Okay. The conclusion of this article is public participation in Malaysia's EIS system differs significantly from recognized international best practices and framework in Canada and New Zealand. The EQA 1974 legislation in Malaysia lacks emphasis on public participation, and related guidelines have unclear procedure. This has led to ineffective implementation of participation. In contrast, legislation in Canada and New Zealand explicitly mandate and guide public participation at all stages, from early notification to decision making. Opportunities for involvement in Malaysia are narrow and occur late, while Canada and New Zealand integrate participation meaningfully throughout the assessment process. Agencies in Canada and New Zealand oversee robust participation implementation according to international standard and principle. Strengthening Malaysia's EIA legal framework and guidelines could draw lessons from the approach used successful in Canada and New Zealand. Participation requirements need to be expanded and clarified to achieve early and broad involvement recognized as best practice. Overall, Malaysia needs reform to its EAI system informed by international case studies in order to enhance public participation activeness. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you and goodbye.